just take a nap. This will be like mini sabbatical. Shh. This is not good modeling, Tracy. My name's Amanda Hightower. I'm the founder and executive director of REST. And I've kind of shared quite a bit about REST already, so you guys are already mic'd, so.
I'm Dennis Mark. I'm the executive director of Redeem Ministries. We're from Houston. And I'll talk about the personal part of us, and then Bobbie can talk about the professional part of us. But we've been married 35 years. We have 3 children, 3 grandchildren now. Been in this fight since March of 2006. So we've got a little bit of mileage under our belt. It's always the mileage that kills you, not the time. So we've experienced a lot of ups and downs. So that's kind of who we are. So I'll let Bobbie talk about our professional side.
All right, so with Redeem Ministries, it has been in existence since 2005, and we opened our safe house in 2010. The opening of our safe house came out of a need. So Redeem Ministries originally was an outreach organization when we started volunteering with them. And as we were doing the outreach and we're meeting women in the spas and the brothels, and they're saying to us, oh yes, I think I need a different job. We understood that part of what they were saying was their shame. But then we went back home and said, what if somebody really comes to us and says, I need to leave this, you know? So we knew that in order to be responsible, we didn't just want to do outreach and say, Jesus loves you and we're praying for you, but we wanted to have something that they could go to when that time came that they were able to step away. So we opened the house, we call it Sparrow House, in 2010, and we didn't have anybody to learn from. So we're so excited that there are conferences now and organizations that people can learn from. Our residential home is long-term, so women are able to come and stay with us for up to 2 years, and we are trauma-informed, survivor-informed, and currently we have 8 beds, an 8-bed capacity, pretty good program. It's a little bit different than what a lot of organizations do, but that's what's great because we need variety. The women are all different, and they each need something unique to suit their needs, so that's what we like about this.
Great. And I'm so excited to get to do this presentation as a team here. We actually met, 2012?
Long time ago.
Long time ago. Bobbie and Dennis happened to be up in Seattle, and we were just kind of in the thick of it. And so it was just such a pleasure to meet you then and kind of still be connected so much.
Right, you guys were doing some pretty amazing outreach work, and we were just starting to do some street reach, and we came up there to learn from you.
Yeah,
that was good.
It's great. It's great. So we're going to be talking about sabbaticals and taking a break. Both of us, one couple and me, have taken sabbaticals in different ways in different times, and so we're going to provide some background and context first, and then go into those kind of examples. So I'm going to start with describing how building a nonprofit is harder than it looks. You've probably already experienced that yourselves, or you're in the thick of it right now, or maybe you thought you were going to start a nonprofit and then you came here and you're like, maybe rethinking it. That's okay. But it is hard, and I think we go into it with a lot of passion and excitement, and then there's some critical things that start kind of confronting us right away that we need to attend to. So I just want to talk about what those kind of pillars are, because if you are kind of just starting getting into it, like, these are going to be some of the things that can end up leading to burnout if we're not careful. Building the team, finding the right team members. So this is huge. And just to provide like a mindset about it, not everyone who is passionate about this work or feels heartbroken about trafficking is going to be right for your team. Not everyone who has years of professional experience in social services or mental health or chemical dependency counseling, or even as a survivor, like, not everyone who has that background is going to be right for your team, and that's okay. You get to take time to discern what your fit is and what the team dynamics should look like. Be thoughtful and be patient and be slow. And so just some like practical things in thinking about building the team that I think have become really helpful because we learned the hard way. Like if somebody was saying they wanted to jump in and help, we mostly started with yes, and then took a long time to be like, oops. And then we'd kind of strengthen our vetting process. And so we learned the hard way so much early on until we really stepped way back and slowed the process way down. Because when we bring somebody on the team that isn't the right fit, we're not only setting them up for failure, but we're just creating extra hardship for us and for the clients. So some ideas, research, especially if you're building a nonprofit, like researching organizational structure early on, finding someone else who's done it before you, and then consider what skills and competencies do you need. If you start with what skills and competencies do you already have on the team, then you're looking at what else you need to round out the team. I attended a session at some conference kind of a few years into REST that became really helpful for me. It was a Predictable Success founder was speaking about their model, and he was describing the difference between visionary, operator, processor, and then a synergist. Different approaches to the work with kind of personality and work styles combined. And so it really helped us to figure out, okay, where do we fit? And like, I can do visionary and some operator. I really am not the processor. And so who can we bring in that has more of that kind of processing side to kind of do the kind of minutia detail things? And so figuring out what you have and what you need is really helpful, developing those job descriptions and then implementing a multi-step vetting process. But it's not just the team. There's also the infrastructure of the organization. The only thing that I think saved me early on with REST is that God sent this amazing woman. Her name is Bridget. She's my best friend to this day. And she was interviewing to intern with me at the church I was working at for a completely different thing. And I was like, do you want to actually just work with me at REST too? And because she had all this kind of nonprofit experience, and she was coming in super just like not really, just humble and interested and engaged. And then I realized she had all of these competencies and skills, and I was like, oh, that's because I had already realized that's what we need. We don't really have that. And so she joined, and she brought this finance background, operations background, and a real skill around facilities and technology. Those are the four main components of like the operations department and operations and finance, or finance and administration for a nonprofit. And you know, the truth is like, we kind of get into it and then we're like, we'll figure that out. We'll figure those details out about finance and HR and all of that stuff. But there's a lot to figure out. And this last year is the first time I've had to really fully step into HR and finance while we were in between directors. I'm just going to tell you, that's not fun. And it's kind of scary because I realize I'm doing things that could either close us down or keep us open, like every day. Even I was hiring new employees, and then I heard someone randomly in passing talk about how they had forgotten to report new employees to DSHS, which is our state health and human health social services thing. And I thought to myself, I should consider doing that for all of the new employees I just onboarded. And so I'm Googling, do I have to report new employees? I mean, having somebody who knows this information, they understand HR law, they understand finance. It's okay if you don't, but having somebody who does is really critical, whether it's on the team or on the board. And then it's about commitment. The bottom line is, like, we're so invested and so passionate, and yet the work never feels finished. So it's pulling on us and it's stretching on us, and that can be what ends up leading us to burnout. We're trying to like tackle all of these things at the same time while we're building. We're trying to do survivor care really well. We're trying to keep this all going forward. We're trying to raise money. So we're really committed. And so we're investing like all of our life into it. We start to lose the relationship piece, and we'll go into that as we share about our personal experiences. But that's another piece. We want to have that commitment. So you're trying to maintain that at the same time that you're feeling like, I can't keep up with everything. And then, of course, the bottom line, quality. At the center of what we're trying to do is quality care. Are we serving survivors well? And because many of us were new to this when we stepped into it, or even if we worked with clients through outreach or vulnerable populations, getting into residential is like a whole other level. And so we're being challenged every day with things we haven't had to face before, and we're having to make decisions in situations that we haven't considered either. And so it just feels really taxing because you want to believe that you're doing it well, but there's also not a lot of evidence early on that you are. And so it feels hard to stay in it. And finding trainings, developing trainings, doing all of those things help, but in the middle of kind of getting going, this becomes really taxing. And so this might lead to, well, who feels like after hearing all of that, they're like, okay, yeah, let's take a sabbatical right now. That's a lot, yeah. So I'm gonna.
The only honest one in the room, right there.
Thank you. Well, she's been doing it. Two hands up. So
In a foot.
I think I'd love you. I'm gonna hand it off. Bobbie and Dennis will share now about why then will we take a sabbatical.
Yeah, I think all those things, you don't realize how much you need those things until you're in a point of desperation. You're so overwhelmed that you're so tunnel visioned that you don't realize that those are things that are extremely needed in your organization. And the problem is that usually by the time you reach that point, the realization is even adds to the stress of your burnout. Of the place that you're at now, and because you realize, wow, I have not done a good job of planning to where I'm at right now as an organization, and so it's critical. And for us, that came in 2016. We were actually at a staff development retreat with our staff, and every time the presenters, Eric and Rachel DeFore, had come and were talking about burnout and compassion fatigue, our staff kept looking at us, and we're like, what are y'all looking at? And so they were looking at us, and we're like, we're good. So Rachel and Eric asked to speak to us, and so we sat down on the couch, and Rachel looks at Bobbie and says, so how you doing? And I'm expecting her to say, we're good. But she burst into tears, weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth. And and I'm like, I guess we're not good. So we talked through this and realized that we had been going 10 years nonstop, pretty much 10 years. We had done different programs, added new things, added staff, tried new things. We're in the middle of opening an assessment center and so many things that had enormous pressure on us that we didn't realize it. It's sort of like being in a submarine. You know, submarines operate in a very, very harsh environment and under the water. And the deeper they go, the more the pressure, until they reach a crush depth that even the submarine cannot withstand, and it collapses the submarine. And so that's kind of where we had gotten to that point where the crush depth we had reached, and now it was just overwhelming us. And so they sent a letter to our board saying, these people need to take a break, or you're going to lose them.
So like in 10 years, we had taken 3 weeks off of the work, and 2 of those weeks we had gone to India to do a mission trip just to get away
To
from
work with trafficking victims. So that was our break. So yeah, so you get to that point where you just don't realize the nature of it. And then once you're in it, because you're realizing that all those things are not in play, then the wheels start falling off, because you haven't built the infrastructure, the team, your commitment's overtaxed, your quality of care is going out the window. All those things, the wheels come off, and so we ended up having to come off a month early off our sabbatical just to put the wheels back on. But it also gave us new perspective of what that looked like for the future. How do we prevent this from happening again? So it's always better to do that on the front end rather than the back end. Because even on our sabbatical, we literally were asking this question, do we want to go back? Do we want to step back into this fight? Are we at a point where we feel like this is still our calling, because it really is. We were talking about earlier about team, that level of finding those right people. And I always tell, real estate's the easy thing. It's a staffing model that's the hardest, of finding the right staff. And so it's not about passion. It's about that build that people have. Do they have the build for it? Because it is they just don't realize what they're dealing with. And so finding that right team is good. And we thought we had a great team, but at the end of the day, we didn't. And everything started coming off. And so that was a big part of it. Yeah. I'm going to give it back over to Amanda now.
Oh, no, you're not.
She's my timekeeper. So these are the things that you're going to see that are part of what you are dealing with in this moment of time, and how these things are basically the things that you're going to look at, that you're going to be willing to give up. Your time, your energy, relationships, health, all these things are affected by where you are.
How many of you guys have seen your time just get sucked away so far? And how about your energy? Has anyone had a loss of energy that's just been kind of sucked away? And you're like, well, so what about relationships? So you've lost a few
Yeah,
relationships?
just keep it up. Yeah, you might as well just.
Did you have friends who used to go to lunch with occasionally and now they're like, I'm tired of hearing? So what about health? Has anyone experienced stress or some, health issues? Has your satisfaction remained the same now as that first day whenever you thought, I just want to love these ladies and wrap my arm? That first time that you gathered together to go step out to do outreach, or you're like, we're going to open this home, and you feel this sense of satisfaction. Is that the same? Has that changed? What about your spirituality? Has anyone had any kind of a spiritual crisis at all? Like, where is God in all of this? As you're hearing the stories of these children being abused and you're seeing, it's like, God, I've prayed for this woman. Where are you in this? So these are all things that you will see get slowly or quickly sucked away if you're not able to take care of yourself and do some things. The loss of these things is what's going to lead to burnout. And it's why you need to plan a break to be able to sustain yourself.
Yeah, for me personally, the speed break came in August of 2012 when I woke up and couldn't feel the left side of my body. I had a stroke. And it was really God going, whoa, slow down. And fortunately, Bobbie was able to pray for me right there in that moment. And the next couple of days later, I was able to walk out of the hospital normal. That left the doctor scratching their heads as to how that was possible. But to me, it was that moment of realization, I cannot continue this path that I'm on. So these things are very real. And it will quickly just suck it right out of you as you're doing this work. So really it's how do you prevent yourself from looking like this. Anybody think this goat's been punched in the face? You don't want to end up with that kind of persona, because that's what people will see. If you go around and walk around enough times, with this baggage, this stuff going on. We found this picture of a demon goat. They called it a demon goat, but you have this sourness about you that people don't want to participate in. They really don't. And so, and I'm going to let Amanda talk to this first thing about self-care.
I'm going to, just before getting to that, share a little bit about kind of what led into my sabbatical experience. We'll save the goat for a minute just so that we don't have to look at that face the whole time.
It's actually cute after a while.
Did I go back to the goat? I'm not good at that. Okay, we'll just look at the whirlpool. It's like a jacuzzi. Think of it like a jacuzzi, which is also a good place to have a sabbatical. I have this kind of stubbornness about me that I think is really, it's like a gift that most of us have that are in this movement. unwillingness to give up if I feel like something's going to drop that could impact the way that we're providing care for our clients. And so for me, that led to trying to build everything the same time we're just launching and like running with it. And when we opened our residential program in 2012, we started small with just 2 beds to see if we could do it well first before having a much larger, not much larger, but larger operation. And so I moved into the house to run it for the first year and be kind of the like live-in house manager. 3 weeks later, I started a full-time master's program. I was also still running the nonprofit as a whole. We had case management going on, outreach going on, all the kind of operation stuff being developed. That was ridiculous. Nobody should have been okay with that scenario. But there were reasons that we felt like really justified in that time to do this. That there probably wasn't going to be a better time to do the master's program. We needed it to contribute to credibility and experience in our region was going to be really important. So there was every step of the way, the things that I chose to do before I reached burnout, and I've reached burnout 3 times in the history of rest. Every time I can go back now and be like, no, like it wasn't worth it, right? Like we could have slowed down and just done it differently, and it wouldn't have taken such a toll on my time and my energy, definitely on my relationships. I've been able to maintain 3 friends since starting rest, and one I saw almost every day because we work together, so that's why that one persevered. The other 2, it was maybe once a quarter. And that my life drastically looked different. I basically was like, I'm definitely no time for dating, no like marriage, children. That's kind of like, this is my marriage and family now. And so the whole concept was like this kind of took over my life, and really impacted the way that I wanted to relate with others, because I was so drained from the relational capacity that my job required, that meeting new people, going to house parties, going to dinner parties, like being around strangers, I was just like, no, you're sad about that you had to walk a mile because something happened, and like I just heard 6 stories about like the worst trauma that somebody's experienced. Like it was so hard to figure out like how to provide space for the things that actually would be nourishing to me. And so that just kind of went in cycles. I would reach burnout, I would recognize it, and then I would want to step away, but there wasn't an opportunity to do so without feeling like things were going to fall apart because we didn't have critical pieces of those circles filled. And so 2 times I reached burnout and I couldn't step away. I had to figure out other things to do. Once I asked the board for a bonus so that I could pay for pretty intense counseling, and I started going to counseling and haven't stopped. I basically decided I will not stop until well, maybe ever, but as long as I'm with rest, at least, I need somebody to process what I'm going through here. The other thing I did was there was like a horse farm close to where I live, so I went over and asked if I could just volunteer bringing the horses in one night a week. They had 21 horses. So that's all I did. I didn't ride them. I just went out and I brought them into their stalls. And it was like the best thing in the world. It was like free horse therapy. Just, but when I got to the 3rd time, and this was last year, we had some transitions in leadership, and I realized as we had grown so much, so in 2012 we had 2 employees and $150,000 budget. Last year we're at 2.2 million and like nearly 40 employees. And we had just outgrown our infrastructure. We had outgrown so many of our systems. Things were starting to crumble, and we didn't have the director of operations and finance still in place anymore. And I was just running at full speed to try and keep up with everything. And I reached a point of, if I don't take a break, like I'm out. And I need to take a break to see if I should even stay in. And there would just happen to be this sweet spot where I could step away for 5 weeks. And the board approved this, and so it felt like we were all on board, and there was kind of a green light just for this like kind of sweet spot that I could step away during a slower time of year. And I went to Europe for 3.5 weeks, and that was really amazing, and I ate really good food in Paris. But the main thing I did on my sabbatical, like you're talking about, was I really went to the Lord and said, what does rest need to be successful? Because I've never considered rest mine. Like, this is the work the Lord is doing through me, and if I can bring gifts and skills into it to help it, like, do the thing it's supposed to do, that's great. But if there's somebody else that can do it better or should do it better or is, like, revived enough to do it, then that's great too. And I really brought that to the Lord and was just like, this isn't mine, this is yours. Like, what do you want to do with it? And I didn't feel like he was saying it was time for me to step away, but he was saying it's time for me to adapt how I was leading. And so the time that I spent away was really just a time of renewal for myself and a renewed sense of confidence in how to step into the work and how to do it differently so that I could sustain the work. And that I knew there was going to need to be some changes on the team because we didn't have the right people in the right places with the right skill sets. And so giving them opportunities to learn those skills and step up, or that we're going to need to make a change because all of us were about to take on a lot more work and how to be sustainable. So it ended up being really useful for me, but it did come at this cost over all of these years. I guess it's still my...
Yeah. So
Did you want, Dennis kind of skipped something earlier, and he kind of,
We've got time. We got so much time.
I know, I'm the timekeeper. I have an alarm set.
Yeah, go ahead. Share more.
Yeah, just so in the why take a sabbatical, how many of you guys were here through lunch yesterday when Becca Johnson was speaking and she talked about compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma? So all of those reasons are the why, because we experience that every single day. You know, we're experiencing vicarious trauma in some of the ways that Becca talked about yesterday. One of the ways when we train our volunteers and staff that we train about one way that you can recognize vicarious trauma is, how many of you guys have heard the term, you know, like this dad is living vicariously through his kid? You know, the dad never got to play football, so he's investing everything in his child, or the mom never got to do ballet, and so now her little girl's in every dance class available. So they're living life through the eyes of their kids, things, you know, that they didn't experience. Sometimes vicarious trauma looks like you're living life through the eyes of your clients. So when you hear yourself either in your mind or audibly out of your mouth saying, all cops are bad, all cops are into this, cops are not going to help you, they're the tricks, they're part of the problem, they're not there for our women. That could be a sign of vicarious trauma, because not all cops are bad. Yeah, there's dirty cops, but not all cops are bad. How many of you, depending on the population you've worked with, maybe have heard yourself or other people say, you know, you look at who your women's traffickers look a lot like. So depending on what population you work with, the majority of your clients' traffickers could be black men, they could be Hispanic men, they could be white men, they could be European, you know, some of the trafficking rings. So how many of you have thought maybe you're at Walmart and you see some black guy with, you know, the chains and the baggy pants, you're like, oh, he's a pimp. You know, not all black guys that wear baggy pants and have chains are pimp. Not all Mexican men who maybe wear a wife beater shirt and have tats are pimps. So that could be a sign of vicarious trauma if you are thinking like your ladies. And a lot of our ladies come in thinking all church people are hypocrites. So if you start thinking that, well, I'm not going to mess with the churches anymore because they're all hypocrites, that could be a sign of vicarious trauma. And that's something that kind of sneaks away. And so that's something I really wanted to focus on, and keeping your ears open. And we did some training with our staff last year on compassion satisfaction and how in compassion fatigue, we look for the satisfaction and how important that is. And so, like Dennis alluded to, our sabbatical, We probably burned out a couple times before as well, and we pushed through because we were in denial. And then when we did step away, we didn't have all of those things in the circles, and our organization pretty much fell apart. We came back after 4.5 months to like less than 20 grand in the bank. They had shut down our assessment center. The safe house ended up dismissing 2 women because our staff thought they knew the policies better than us, and they thought that, Bobbie's a little bit too strict, so I'm going to lighten the rules. And their lightening of the rules caused our women to have freedom that they shouldn't have had, which allowed them to make decisions that were not healthy for themselves. So they both got dismissed, and so the safe house closed. For that time while we were on sabbatical, assessment center shut down. And so it was crumbling, and we came back. We were thinking we're going to come back and kind of get it back on its feet, and then we're going to leave. But our board allowed us and really worked with us to get more funding, bring in more supporters, apply for some grants that we wouldn't normally have applied for, increase our budget to be able to pay sustainable wages to our staff, because previously, pre-sabbatical, we were all missionary status. So like Dennis and I were making like $1,500 a month, and then we were all raising support. So to raise support and do this work, it's just exhausting. You can't do it. But we all know that people don't like to give money to pay someone's salary. But our board came in behind us because they knew how important, and they saw that they pretty much let the ministry fall apart while we were gone, and then able to come up and build that infrastructure.
Yeah, and the part of that infrastructure that we're talking about too is your board. And one of the people that spoke to us when we were on sabbatical came to us, and we were being honest, saying, look, we don't know if we want to come back. And he really spoke life into us. And so soon after that, I asked him, hey, would you please be on our board? Yes, I want you to handle development, but I also want you to be the person who cares for us, who watches us, who helps us. And so your board, that's one of the responsibilities the board should have, that you should have, is people on that board who will take care of you and draw the boundaries for you, because you're not able to draw your own boundaries, but you have to have somebody that can speak life into you and hold you accountable to your own well-being. It's very critical. These things are very important.
Yeah, and I think even before starting REST, as long as I've been in social services, I have consistently heard the message that you have to take care of yourself before you take care of others, and how important self-care is. Like, it's been this ongoing thing that I have heard, and for some reason, I would get into a situation and think, well, it doesn't apply right now. Well, it doesn't apply in this scenario, and it does. And so if you find yourself doing that, just set it aside and just really go back and hold on to, even if you're not feeling it, you're not believing it, how can you take care of yourself and your team? And I think it is true that in this movement, I think it's really common to step into it with really minimal funding, and we're going to staff the house with interns and volunteers, and we're going to do no pay because somebody's just got to have a heart that they want to do this, and so they'll just be there, and it's kind of we're all on call all the time. But we're creating the design in that for crushing our team and putting so much burden on them that they can't actually care for survivors well. So when we launched a different program, so the opening of our initial residential program, not great. It ended up going well for the clients, but we were all just a disaster. But the emergency receiving center is our emergency shelter with 7 individual rooms for adult women. It's also connected to a drop-in center. Anyway, it's a pretty big program, and it's also a really low barrier program, so we knew we were going to have folks coming in with extremely high needs, untreated mental illness, active chemical dependency, actively involved in the sex trade, just a lot of stuff going on. So we went about that launch very differently. We raised the funding for 3 years. We didn't get all the way to our goal before we decided to launch, but the timing was just right in terms of space that opened up. but we hired the supervisor 6 months before opening, and then we hired 2 other key positions 3 months before opening, and then everyone else, we overstaffed by about 15%. We overhired for all of the support staff. And we did a boot camp with the whole team for 2 weeks before we launched. That's like, ended up being like 18 people that, like, if they wanted to work here and they met the skills, even if they're going to be part-time 16 hours a week, they got to fit this 2-week boot camp in, and we're going to pay them really well to do that and make that worth their while. But that launch went so differently than any other launch of a program before. And I would say if I had to go back and relaunch our first residential program, I would have just waited and done that so differently, knowing if I knew then what I know now. Yeah.
Right.
And so I think some of the key kind of takeaways and how to approach this is self-care is so important. Maintaining a rhythm of self-care and figuring out what it is, like Beck was saying, what is it that actually replenishes you? Not just like being quiet and restful and relaxing, but also like what are the activities you can be engaged in that are replenishing and invigorating and inspiring, that actually inspire hope as well, and laughter and joy, because the world that we're in has a lot of heaviness. The truth is, like, working with survivors is also a lot of fun at times, and really there is a lot of laughter in it, I have found, and it can be really inspiring as well. It's not all dark and heavy, but it is hard. But how do you balance that out and keep that rhythm in and protect it? And have mutual accountability across the team to protect that for one another. So one of the things that we have implemented is all staff that are kind of supervisors and below have cell phones that we pay for, or Google Voice numbers, but preferably a Rest cell phone that we cover and pay for, that they have hours that they're on, hours that they're off. That way they don't have direct access from clients, and no one shares personal phone numbers with clients, because we need people to believe that they are off and that there's somebody else, that if there's a situation like that, it can be resolved. And of course, in our scenario, we have a 24/7 shelter that runs our 24/7 hotline, so there's always awake staff there. There's always 2 awake staff in that shelter, so that has made it easier, and I know that not everybody has the resources to do that, but finding ways to give people a cutoff point is really helpful. So regular rhythms of self-care.
And one more point about that self-care. You have a handout, a sachet handout, because how many of you what do you think about how often you should be doing self-care? No or do? How often do you do self-care? What should you do for self-care? How often should you do self-care? And the answer is every day. It's not like, okay, in 3 months I'm going to do self-care. It's an everyday thing. And this sachet handout is designed to help you with that. When you wake up in the morning, when you get ready to go to bed at night, these are check-ins that you do. Where am I emotionally? When you have a critical incident or a critical event happen, do the sachet. We do that with our ladies. If we dismiss a woman from the house, we gather all the ladies in the house and we do the sachet. Tell us how you're feeling, so that you verbalize those things that you're feeling, so that you have a way to vent them out. That's critical. So you have to be mindful that self-care is a thing that happens every day. And then we're talking about single point of failure. I mentioned that earlier. That's, again, is a thing that you look at in your organization. Where is it that if I'm not doing it, it's going to collapse? And that's what we discovered. We had so many things were depending on us at being there. And when we weren't there, things didn't happen. And the message got lost, things fell apart. And so now we've diversified the organization to where we have a finance director who is also our HR director. We have a very strong operations director. Our staff in the house are very well equipped to make decisions without having to rely on us. And so identifying those single point of failures in your organization are very critical, so that when you have to take a step away, that's not something that's nagging at you from the sidelines, because it will. The next thing is policy procedures. You know, that's probably one of those curse words for organizations, but it's absolutely necessary. I'm I'm a policy procedure geek. That's how I've made my living in the past, by writing policy procedures. But the policy procedures, two things are very important. One, these are the things that save your butt. When things go sideways and something happens, you have those to fall back on. Now, you can identify, did somebody violate a policy procedure, or was a policy procedure not followed, whatever it was, but your policy procedures document who you are, how you do it, why you do it, all those things. Critical, critical, critical.
The policies and procedures will also save your mental capacity when it comes time to dismiss a client, because if you're in the midst of the emotion and you love this woman sitting in front of you and you know she's got all of this potential and all these great things about her, but she has just broken one of your non-negotiables, then you are able to dismiss her without going through this emotional battle within or with your staff. And we've had it happen both ways, where staff is like, but what if this is her trauma, but we're trauma informed. And then that dismissal, you end up feeling guilty, and especially if she goes out and relapses. And you need to have those policies and procedures in place so that it takes it off of you, and this is the way it is.
Well, and I think it comes also adding to that is if you think, what was Becca's thing, you're the only lifeguard on the beach, like you're
Yes.
the only one that can provide the care this person needs. When we hear that from any employee at rest, and if I've ever thought that myself, we know we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Like we're going down a really dangerous path to burnout. And it's not respecting either the resiliency of the clients as individuals as well, who also have survived much more than we can likely imagine. And so it's recognizing the strengths of the clients also, I think, has contributed to us feeling a little less burdened to save everybody's life.
Right.
Because they've been pretty good at staying alive, at least to the point where that they've gotten to our organization. So they've got a lot of skills to bring to the table. We don't have to do everything.
And your policy procedures also include self-care. You need to be intentional about make that policy procedure about how you take care of yourself and how to take care of your staff. What are the tools that you use? What is the frequency of that? All those things need to be in there so that your staff knows I'm going to be taken care of. That's very important.
It's really important. Also, being intentional, calendar in time for this. And so if it's part of the policies and procedures, it does feel like it gives you permission. One of the conversations I hope to have with my board is how do we actually put in rhythms of intended breaks that are different than vacation time? How can we write that into the budget, and like what positions should they apply to, or who has access to that? But how do we make this something that it doesn't feel awkward asking for, because it's not pre-established, right? So be intentional to kind of think ahead and build these in to the calendar. And then also have a monitor for yourself. Like, how are you checking in with kind of a burnout measure or a compassion fatigue measure? Don't wait till it gets to the point where you are like under your desk crying, or like you wake up in the morning to go to work and you like pull the covers over your head and you just cry and you're like, I never ever want to go back there. At one point, I ended up moving an hour away from rest out to the country. And it was just because I was like, I just feel like I need to get away. I need something that feels completely different than the kind of experience I'm having every day. Not because I hate it and not because it's like just like I dread it, but because having something that feels different reminds me that it's not my whole world. And so just be intentional about how can you set up your rhythms so that you're having the space you need to recharge and replenish. And then integrate. So integrate these things. So you want to be intentional, you want to plan ahead. How do you integrate it into the policies and procedures? I've heard from a few organizations now, as I've been talking about sabbaticals, that integrate a paid sabbatical of from 5 weeks up to 3 months every 3 or 4 years. It's just part of the plan. It's expected, and it's like you have to do it if you're in a director position. Like that's just part of the plan. You get a additional paid sabbatical every 3 or 4 years, and that helps folks stay in the work. the folks who are doing internet crimes against children, where they're like viewing all the kinds of traumatic things online, they rotate people out every 3 years because after 3 years, the level of trauma that they're hearing about and seeing, they've kind of reached a point where they're like super saturated, and so they need time away. And so they've kind of realized that, and I think that's something we can consider as well. I think anywhere you kind of figure it out based on what the resources are that you're going to invest into it, but 5 weeks up to maybe a couple months, 3 months.
Some people do it 1 month every year, so that it's not such a burden. Just depends. There's several resources to look to as to how you would plan a sabbatical. And like for us, it was 6 months because we had gone so long. Because it took 30 days just for us to unplug and not think about everything. I mean, it was tough. And so it's easier to do that when you do it more frequently rather than having to wait until you have to have 6 months or a year, or you're just gone and you don't come back, period.
Yeah, we provide 15 days of paid vacation a year, but also for anyone that is a salaried employee, so our supervisors, managers, and directors, they also get comp time benefits. So basically, any week that they work over 45 hours, and all of those hours go into a bank that they can apply towards time off over the course of the year. And because we're basically communicating to them, we don't want your regular rhythm to be beyond like 45 hours a week max. And so if you're banking all of this up, then we are talking about that. Like, what's happening? What tasks are like extending you too far? Who else do we need to add? Do we need to start raising funds to split this role? But we also want them to take that time off in addition to their vacation time.
And what we do with our residential staff, we also have the 2 weeks paid vacation a year, but for our house manager, she will take 1 week every quarter off, so she gets 4 weeks a year. And we recommend it to be like the last week of each quarter, just so she knows she can go away and have a whole week to replenish.
Okay, but before you ask that, though, I think we should all switch to the happy goat.
Yes.
Because this is what it can be like if you're taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Okay, now Kim.
Thank you.
How do you get the buy-in from your board? It is something I have struggled with for approximately 2 years, and to where I just said, I resigned because I wasn't getting buy-in from my board of directors. And I have had a really good board of directors, HR people, could not get the buy-in of paying for self-care, paying for sabbaticals, paying for...
You need a new board.
That was my answer.
I just couldn't get the buy-in. So is there, and I know I'm asking a little question, how did you get your board to buy in? I couldn't. I had a board of 10, 11 really good people, but it was like talking to a wall.
Yeah, headlocks work.
No.
Headlocks. No, your board needs to be educated on the reality of what you're doing. They need to be coming to the trainings on trauma care. They need to be educated. They need to know what you're experiencing, because oftentimes boards are so separated from the operational aspect that they're only focused on sustainability, fiduciary responsibilities, governance. They don't understand the trench work. So that's one of the things that we've done is most people come to our board, they're very well educated on that. And so that's the best way to do it.
I
Or
think
change your board.
too, also strategically, one of the things I like to do is provide options for people. And so I give them like, here's 4 ways I could see this going. We do nothing. And in 3 months, this, in 6 months, this. This is what I'm predicting. We do this, like minimal, and maybe we've got 9 months before we're done here. And so you paint the picture for your board and let them decide. I mean, a reasonable board, and if they say, actually, we're going to go with this one, like we're not going to do anything and like just you can do it, hang on then. then you are definitely in a position where you want to have a more probably a more confrontational conversation just about what they're asking, and if that is actually in line with the mission of the organization, if it's going to support it, because that's the role of the board members, to support the mission of the organization, and they need to also be speaking into the undergirded foundation of what's going to make that success possible. Yeah.
I think also, one other point, your board should be arguing for you to take a sabbatical or a break. That's how it should be working. That's what it was for us. We were arguing with our board, no, we're not, and they're like, yes, you are.
Like one of our board members has property in Scotland. No,
Scotland.
Scotland, and she was going to give us miles to send us to Scotland for a month while we were on sabbatical, but I couldn't take my dog, so we didn't. Yes, for yeah, we couldn't take our dog, so we didn't want to go for a whole month.
Attachment issues.
That's a whole other session.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is a similarly loaded question, and it's slightly more personal. So, Amanda, you said you're one of those people who's very stubborn, right? And it can be like right in your face, and you're like, nope,
I'm gonna do this.
doesn't apply. So what would have worked, I guess, for each of you individually in terms of the conversation that staff could have had with you about this is real, this needs to be now? Because I'm still fairly new in this work, but we have leadership that's been in it and has not taken a break for a really long time. And I see a lot of signs that I'm concerned about, but I don't know how to convince, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, like when I'm in that mode of like I got so much to do, and because the thing about like staying in it and like not giving yourself a break is that you kind of get like tougher and tougher over time, and so it also makes the people around you feel like not sure I want to push on that, not sure what will happen there, and so the side door, like you think of a house, like just let's not go right in through the front door. Let's come in at it from the side. Like, hey, can we just talk about something? Like, I've just had this thing on my mind. I wanted to like get your take on it. And then you just talk about the topic, right? And like, well, how do you think this is, like, where do you feel like you're at? Or I see all of these strengths and skills in you, but I also feel concern for you. And I have this compassion like building up in me, and I want you to be able to stay in this so that we can continue to work together. Would it be okay with you if I offer you some reflections of what I've seen? If somebody had done that for me, and I think because I come across as though like I'm super like I got it all together and figured it out, that folks think I maybe not be as approachable. But if somebody came to me with that, I would be like, oh my gosh, yeah, please tell me. What's happening to me? Because deep down, I'm also like, it's all falling apart. And that's what's happening inside, which makes me do this. And so if somebody's just recognizing that, it's almost like, okay, I'm not alone. Yes, like give me the feedback. And then we can plan together. So someone might appear to be like really closed off, but gently and incrementally we approach it, and then hopefully the compassion will win out. That's my suggestion. It's not going to work for everybody.
Yeah, motivational interviewing works.
And coming back from a conference like this, we always send our board notes and our takeaways, and so they know that the conference was worth our money, the ministry's money.
That's a good idea.
You just send them, these are notes from all the sessions, and that would be a good open door, on this session.
We've got 2 minutes, yeah.
So I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings in the room, but I have a generational difference question. When you talk about the word self-care, that is a new term in some ways. And so newer, millennial, right out of college, all those, they're all into self-care. And so my question is multiple parts, I think, but sometimes to those of us who are not so young anymore, it can sound selfish.
Or entitled.
And because you're like, well, I just pushed through, I just whatever. And you have a multi-generational staff team. How do you guys face that when some of the younger generation, they really are being selfish? Like they're asking for things that you're going, like your comparison of, oh my gosh, I had to walk in the rain versus this girl just got great, like the difference. So they're whining about that, and I'm going, but do you know that I have to deal with a board, that I have to deal with this, I have to deal with that? And so they're whining about but I need self-care, that's self-care. And I'm like, right, but you have 3 other days that you could have done
Sure.
self-care. So can you talk about self-care balancing inside a generational, outside of a
No, it's good. It's a really good question. We see that, and certainly something that, going back to the, I think policies and procedures are really helpful. If you have it all built in, like, well, this is what we do, and so like, integrate this, like this is how we do kind of self-care and attend to the person. If this fits for you, that's great. If you're finding that you actually need more than what we can provide, let us know so we can start looking for somebody else. It's a job. And I think we get confused about that sometimes because
Right.
the work is so relational.
when we've done the missionary style thing, so it's like they feel like having
For sure, for sure. But you have, yeah, you
Right.
if you have the qualifications and the job expectations all built in, like we'll say we have folks who they don't like parts of their job and so they don't actually think they need to do it. I don't understand that I was raised in a military family and that like if I don't have that in me like to approach that and so I get really confused by that. And for a while I was like, okay, let's figure out how to accommodate that because I was just like never heard that before. And so I think going back to actually these are the expectations of the job and we're probably not going to have you go in and do all of the other things that you want to do until these things are actually being fulfilled.
some self-care policies. Would you mind sharing those, just the self-care policies that you've already written?
Yeah, I'm actually updating mine right now because of this conference. And so, yeah, more contact information up here. You can send an email to us and definitely would be able to share that with you. So I think we're out of time.
We are.
But we can talk. We'll be here afterwards to talk and answer questions too.